three most impactful things you can do. No single-use plastic water bottles, no cans that have BPA, and no plastic for food, especially hot food.
Are you struggling with bloating, gas, constipation, and fatigue, but don't know what's causing these problems? The Gut Health Reset podcast with Dr. Anne-Marie Barter dives deep into the root causes behind these issues that start in the gut. This podcast will give you the knowledge you need to heal your gut and reset your health.
Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It is amazing to have you again.
My pleasure, Anne-Marie. I'm so grateful we can do this. This will be fun.
Yes. And the last time you were on, it was awesome. You just so much important information.
Brain dump.
Yeah. And it was so much. And so I wanted to break this down into smaller pieces because I think what you're talking about is so incredibly important. And it's so incredibly important that people pick up your book and incorporate this into their lives. But yeah. I want to just go through a few of the main categories and we're just going to break them down into smaller pieces. But I want to start with plastic. There's so much misinformation around plastic and what chemical is plastic?
Sure. So it's called bisphenol A, otherwise known as BPA. I think you've seen on certain containers BPA free. And the bisphenol A disrupts it's a xenoestrogen. So meaning it acts like an estrogen, but it's not really an estrogen, and it disrupts the entire endocrine system. So endocrine is thyroid, adrenals, ovarian, or testes, depending on your gender. And it really can wreak havoc on your health.
Which is very scary. And so we do know, I just want to dive into this for just a second. We do know that estrogen can be terrible for the gut, for example, and, it being the Gut Health Reset podcast, but how does estrogen have a little bit of an impact on the gut there?
So there's so many layers to this, Anne-Marie. So estrogen winds up in the gut as something to process, but too high or too low for both estrogen and progesterone, too high, too low can make you feel bloated, throw off the function of the gut, make you feel wrong. And so when it ends up in the gut to be processed, it shouldn't impact the gut in any way because by that point it's inert. However, if it gets separated from its binder, it then becomes more back to being an intermediate reactive process that can make it be even more toxic and throw off the system even more. So it's kind of all these roads lead to gut dysfunction, endocrine dysfunction, fatigue. It's pretty broad.
Right. Absolutely. And how are we getting BPA into our bodies?
Yeah. So BPA is used as a liner for a lot of cans to make food not stick to it. So unless your can specifically says BPA free or the company says we don't use it, you're getting exposed to BPA and they're not required to put it on their bottles. It's like a trade secret kind of thing. So cans is one way. So canned food. Plastic water bottles, super bad for you. And it's funny, I just noticed that some of the major water companies said BPA free on their bottles, except it's still plastic. So it might not be bisphenol A, but it's another derivative, one molecule change. So it's not BPA, but it's still plastic in the bottles and it still doesn't degrade. And then another major source would be if you're eating food from plastic containers, and it's warm, it's causing the plastic to leach into the food and you're getting exposed that way.
Yeah. I mean, just to break this down, in a couple of different ways, I remember getting a call from somebody and they're like, do you eat canned tomatoes? I'm like, no. And they're like, why? And BPA. And they're like, I did not know there was BPA in canned tomatoes, which is kind of scary, right? Yeah. You're getting organic or whatnot, but yet still. And so I think that that's an amazing point that you brought up. The other thing is we're moving into summertime and you keep those plastic water bottles in your car.
Oh, yes. It's terrible. It's terrible.
And so heating those up on top of it also, and then people also don't think about putting hot food into plastic containers, not just heating them up, but hot food into plastic containers.
Yep.
Right.
Plastic and food don't go together.
Yeah. So just stay away from that. Instead, use glass. Right.
Yep.
So it's pretty scary. So how is BPA disrupting our microbiome?
At a specific level, I don't know the answer to how it specifically does that.
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah. So it's not, we won't dive into the chemistry of it because I don't know it. I don't think anyone does. It's really what's happening is that these are foreign substances that the body has to deal with, and it creates stress on the system. And it's interesting because we're talking about a number of different things in our conversation, but a lot of these toxins boil down to, they create an environment of stress and imbalance that throws the microbiome off, throws the adrenals off, throws the liver off. And I don't know if you remember, if I even referred to that in our other conversation, that the Holy Trinity, so the adrenals, the liver, and the gut is the medical Holy Trinity. And if one's thrown off, they're all thrown off. So if your gut is slightly challenged, it'll send signals to the adrenals, stressing them. And when the adrenals are stressed, they shut down detox. So you start to see this, I call it circling the drain. One throws off the other and it just perpetuates itself. So when the microbiome is thrown off, you can have kind of any symptom: bloating, gas, diarrhea, constipation, overgrowth of inappropriate bacteria. And with inappropriate bacteria, get oversecretion of something called beta-glucuronidase, which is this enzyme that causes you to recycle hormones that were previously inert on their way out of your body. You're recycling them as very toxic intermediate forms. So a disrupted microbiome can then go on to disrupt your hormone levels even more.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen any clinically, have you seen that with BPA that you think is correlated there with higher levels of beta-glucuronidase?
It's hard to draw a straight line between them because we're never just impacting one thing. Mm-hmm. We're never just saying, okay, cut out your plastic water bottles and we'll check beta-glucuronidase in 6 months. It doesn't quite go like that. It's really I call it a team approach, because we're doing the adrenals, the liver, the gut, the hormones, the toxins all at the same time. And so when you put that in that basket, it does absolutely impact beta-glucuronidase. Although I have to tell you, if I see high beta-glucuronidase, I'm not just waiting for it to go down. We're actively inhibiting it. So by the time I recheck it, it's down because I've given someone all these things to inhibit its production.
Yes, that's so, very important, very important. And beta-glucuronidase, I just want to touch on this a little bit. When you see high levels of beta-glucuronidase, are you nervous about things like colon cancer or polyps or anything to that degree? Which, it's not just some fancy, fun, term. So
no, I say to women, you can draw a straight line between beta-glucuronidase and increased risk of estrogen-dependent cancers and hormone-dependent cancers. So 100%, I say to them, especially, 40% of women have fibroids. Fibroids are an estrogen-dominant state, and beta-glucuronidase creates an estrogen-dominant state. And so absolutely, I'm concerned about cancers. And I'm like, we need to get this down because it's stimulating the system to produce or be out of sync.
Right. Absolutely. So detox pathways need to run, right?
Yeah.
And so,
yes.
So this is very important. So how do we avoid BPA?
It's super easy, right? Don't put food in plastic, period. Just sort of go, okay, no more plastic. We're getting rid of it. Don't heat food in plastic. My kids were like, it's heavier. I'm like, I don't care. It's heavier. Just carry it. Don't drink from the single-use plastic water bottles. They're really bad for you. And that includes, you don't think about it, but like kombucha. A lot of people love their kombucha, but it comes in a plastic bottle unless you're making it yourself. And then look for on your cans something that would say BPA-free lining, because that's another huge source. These are the 3 most impactful things you can do. No single-use plastic water bottles, no cans that have BPA, and no plastic for food, especially hot food.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for educating us on BPAs. This has just been awesome to have you here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne Marie. My pleasure.